"We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary." He smirked, the corners of his mouth barely twitching upwards in a gesture that was more a contemptuous twist than an actual smile. It was during my termination meeting, and the words, though delivered with a veneer of professional politeness, felt like a blunt instrument to the gut. Nothing personal, just cost-cutting. "My name is Victor Hale. I am 55 years old, or rather, I was 55 years old and the lead systems engineer at Veltria Housing for 18 years. Until that moment. 18 years. That number echoed in the quiet, sterile conference room, a stark contrast to the casual dismissal of my worth. I had built their entire technological infrastructure from scratch, a sprawling, intricate digital nervous system that spanned multiple states and managed thousands of properties. I had architected every single expansion, every new feature, every subtle improvement. For almost 2 decades, I had kept everything running with such seamless efficiency, such quiet reliability that the executives had, quite literally, forgotten just how much the entire company depended on me. They had grown accustomed to the illusion of effortless operation, oblivious to the hidden complexities and the constant vigilance required to maintain it. And then, one ordinary Tuesday, they decided they couldn't afford me anymore. I sat across from Graham Vickers, the new Chief Technology Officer. He'd been with Veltria Housing for all of 6 months, a blink in the company's history compared to my tenure. He was 42. His designer glasses perched precariously on a sharp nose, his meticulously groomed hair reflecting the fluorescent light. His MBA from Cornell was undoubtedly the first bullet point on his resume, a credential he seemed to wear like a badge of superior intellect. He had been brought in, I understood, to modernize operations. Apparently, in Graham's lexicon, modernization began by excising the most experienced, most deeply entrenched staff. The severance package is generous, Diane from Human Resources announced, her voice flat and rehearsed as she slid a thick, buff, colored folder across the polished conference table. 2 months' salary, plus your accrued vacation time. Her gaze flickered to me, then quickly away, a practiced avoidance of eye contact that spoke volumes about her discomfort. I nodded, took the folder, the weight of it feeling strangely insubstantial in my hand. "Thank you," I said, the words emerging without inflection, devoid of any discernible emotion. Graham leaned forward slightly, a faint frown creasing his brow. "Is that all you have to say?" He looked almost disappointed, as if my lack of protest was a personal affront. Perhaps he'd anticipated a dramatic outburst, a heated argument, or even a threat of legal action. He might have been looking for something juicy to report to the board, a narrative of my being difficult or unreasonable to justify his decision. "What would you like me to say?" I asked, my voice still level, almost monotonous. "Most people in your position have questions, concerns. About the future, about the transition." His voice trailed off, a hint of confusion entering his tone. I simply shrugged, a small, wary gesture. "Seems pretty straightforward to me." Graham exchanged a quick, bewildered glance with Diane, who looked equally perplexed by my unnerving calm. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly grasp from their privileged vantage point, was that I wasn't calm. Not in the slightest. I was just done. There's a fundamental, crucial difference between the two states. Calm implies a quiet composure, a controlled reaction. Don't implies a profound, absolute exhaustion, a complete severance from the emotional investment in a situation. I was beyond anger, beyond despair. I was simply empty. "Well, we'd appreciate your help with the transition," Graham continued, regaining a semblance of his corporate composure. "The new engineering team will need some guidance on the system architecture, perhaps a consulting arrangement for a few weeks." He offered it like a lifeline, or maybe a trap. "I'll think about it," I said, already knowing with absolute certainty that I wouldn't. The thought of extending my association with them, even for a moment, was repugnant. We shook hands, a fleeting, perfunctory clasp of palms. I cleared out my desk, quietly and efficiently, without a single complaint. It was a remarkably swift process. 18 years of my professional life, the accumulated knowledge, the countless hours, the very essence of my contributions, all fit into a single cardboard box. It was shockingly little. As I walked past the cubicles, I nodded goodbye to a few colleagues who looked away awkwardly, their gazes skittering around the room, afraid, perhaps, that the same fate awaited them if they lingered too long in my shadow. Their fear was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of the precariousness of their own positions. As I walked towards my truck in the parking garage, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Alan, the database administrator. I had hired him 12 years ago, a bright, eager young man who had blossomed under my mentorship. "This is bullshit, Vic. The whole team's freaking out." I didn't respond. There was nothing I could say that would alleviate their anxiety, and besides, I was too depleted to try. At home, I gravitated towards the deck, the familiar scent of cedar comforting in the cool evening air. I sat in my favorite Adirondack chair, overlooking the vast expanse of Lake Ontario, the setting sun painting the water in brilliant, shifting hues of copper and rose. I nursed a glass of bourbon, letting the warmth spread through me, trying to numb the dull ache in my chest. My wife, Elaine, stepped out onto the deck, her presence a quiet comfort. She placed a hand on my shoulder, a gentle, reassuring weight. "What will you do now?" she asked, her voice soft, understanding. I shrugged, looking out at the shimmering lake. "Something will turn up." It was a platitude, but for the first time, I felt a faint stir of genuine belief. What Graham didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to learn, because his focus was solely on the metrics of cost reduction, was that I hadn't just built their systems. I had coded large, intricate sections of the infrastructure myself, often working late into the night, pouring years of accumulated experience into every line. And crucially, I had done it with minimal documentation. The company had always refused to fund a proper documentation team, citing it as an unnecessary expense. They had seen it as an overhead, not an investment in long-term stability. Only I truly understood the deep redundancies woven into the system's fabric, the fail-safes designed to prevent catastrophic failures, the hidden security layers implemented to protect sensitive tenant data from external threats, and the incredibly intricate network architecture that allowed seamless communication across disparate systems and geographies. These were not off-the-shelf solutions, they were custom-engineered, bespoke solutions tailored precisely to Veltria's unique, evolving needs. And now, the company that had undervalued and dismissed me, the company that had actively resisted my pleas for proper documentation, would discover the true cost of their penny, wise, foolish decisions. I wasn't planning to explain any of it to anyone now, not after what they had done. My journey at Veltria Housing, or rather, at Bayview Properties as it was then known, began nearly 2 decades ago. It was a small real estate management firm, humble in its beginnings, with a mere 4 apartment complexes under its belt, and a dozen employees scrambling to keep up. Their entire IT infrastructure, if you could even call it that, consisted of 2 clunky desktop computers, a prehistoric fax machine that perpetually ran out of paper, and a dial-up internet connection that shrieked and groaned its way into cyberspace. Harold Bayview, the owner, a man with a shrewd eye for potential and a genuine respect for craftsmanship, had hired me away from a consulting gig in Syracuse. "We're expanding, Victor," he'd told me, his voice rough but earnest. "We need someone who can build us something solid, something that will last." He wasn't looking for a quick fix or a flashy, unproven solution. He wanted stability, reliability, a foundation upon which to build his empire. And I had delivered. Over the next 18 years, I had transformed that rudimentary setup into an integrated property management system that was the envy of many larger firms. It handled everything, from initial tenant applications and rigorous background checks to automated maintenance requests that dispatched contractors with precision, and a robust rent collection system that processed payments across 63 properties spanning 4 different states. I had built it piece by painstaking piece, adapting, upgrading, refining the architecture as the company grew, anticipating future needs, and solving problems before they even fully materialized. It was my magnum opus, a digital reflection of my dedication and expertise. When Harold retired 5 years ago, his son Justin, a man more interested in the bottom line than the legacy, sold the company to a private equity firm. They rebranded it as Veltria Housing, a slicker, more modern name, and initially, they kept me on. They seemed genuinely impressed by the sprawling, efficient system I had meticulously constructed. But then, slowly, insidiously, things began to change. New executives brought in by the private equity firm arrived with their MBAs and their buzzwords. Their priorities shifted dramatically. Quarterly targets, shareholder value, and immediate returns became paramount, eclipsing any concern for long-term stability, technical debt, or the foundational integrity of the systems that powered their operations. My warning signs came gradually, subtle at first, then growing more insistent. The first major red flag was their rejection of my proposal for a dedicated documentation team. Too expensive, they'd said, their voices dismissive, a collective wave of their hands. We'll get to it next quarter. That quarter, of course, never came. And neither did the next, or the one after that. The crucial task of codifying my institutional knowledge was continually deferred, deemed an unnecessary luxury. Then they started bringing in consultants. Young MBA types, fresh out of business school, who spoke with a zealous fervor about disrupting property management and leveraging cloud solutions. They'd sit through my detailed explanations of our bespoke system architecture, their eyes glazed over with boredom or, perhaps, a profound lack of comprehension. They would nod sagely, feigning understanding, only to then recommend generic, off-the-shelf software solutions that would never, under any circumstances, integrate seamlessly with our deeply custom infrastructure. Their recommendations were designed for simple, modular businesses, not the complex, interconnected web I had created. I kept pushing back, patiently, persistently. I explained in painstaking detail why their cookie-cutter approach wouldn't work, why it would introduce more problems than it solved. I showed them the elegant, custom-coded sections that made our system unique, resilient, and incredibly efficient. But their eyes remained vacant, their minds already made up by abstract business models and industry white papers. Eventually, they simply stopped inviting me to planning meetings altogether. My voice, the voice of the architect who had built their very foundation, was silenced. Elaine noticed it before I did. Her intuition, as always, was sharper than mine. "They're pushing you out, Victor," she said one night over dinner, her voice quiet but firm. "You need to prepare." I brushed her off, perhaps out of denial, perhaps out of a stubborn belief in my own indispensability. "They need me," I argued. "No one else understands how the whole system works together. It's too complex." "That might be exactly the problem," she replied, her gaze steady, insightful. Her words, though unsettling at the time, would prove to be chillingly prescient. 6 months before my termination, they hired Graham as the new CTO. He came from a banking software company, a sector known for its rigid standardization and its propensity to discard anything deemed legacy. He immediately started talking about standardization, consolidation, and legacy system replacement. His agenda was clear, even if his understanding of our unique system was not. He hired 3 junior engineers, fresh out of college, their faces bright with theoretical knowledge and boundless, untested enthusiasm. He had them shadowing me, asking questions about the system, diligently taking notes. I answered their questions, patiently explaining the intricacies, trying to impart years of practical wisdom in mere weeks. But I knew, deep down, that they weren't grasping the true complexities. How could they? It had taken me years to build those systems, to understand the myriad interdependencies, to create the robust redundancies that kept everything running smoothly even when unforeseen problems arose. It was a lifetime of knowledge, compressed into a few scattered training sessions. It was simply not enough. Last week, Graham had stopped by my office, a casual smile playing on his lips. "Quick meeting tomorrow morning, Victor," he'd said, his tone utterly benign. "Just a quarterly check-in." I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there, clear as day, for months. But sometimes hope, or perhaps just a stubborn refusal to believe the worst, clouds one's judgment. The first call came 2 weeks after my termination. I was in my home office, updating my resume, a task I hadn't seriously undertaken in nearly 2 decades. My phone rang, displaying Graham Vickers on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, a small, grim smile touching my lips. A few seconds later, the notification pinned. His voice, somewhat strained, filled the small office. "Victor, it's Graham. We're having some issues with the tenant portal. The junior team is working on it, but they're having trouble understanding some of your code architecture. Could you give us a call back? It would just be a quick consultation." I deleted the message. Then I went back to my resume, typing a few more lines describing my extensive experience in complex system architecture. The irony was not lost on me. 3 more calls came that day, each voicemail sounding increasingly desperate, the initial polite request giving way to a thinly veiled urgency. By evening, Alan texted me, his messages growing more frantic. "System's been down all day. Maintenance requests aren't processing. Graham's losing his mind." The next morning, Diane from HR called. Her voice, usually so clipped and formal, carried a new, almost pleading note. "Victor, I hope you're doing well." A beat of awkward silence. "I'm calling because we'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement, just temporary, to help with some current system issues. The compensation would be quite generous." This time, I picked up. "How generous?" I asked, my voice flat, betraying nothing. $300 per hour. She quickly replied, a note of triumph in her voice, as if this figure would surely sway me. "Minimum 4-hour engagement." I paused, letting the silence hang. $300 an hour. That was more than double my previous rate, a tacit acknowledgement of my value, though they wouldn't admit it aloud. "I'll think about it and get back to you," I said, then hung up before she could respond. I sat at my kitchen table, a fresh cup of coffee cooling in front of me, staring out at the calm, shimmering expanse of the lake. Elaine walked in, setting a plate of toast beside my coffee. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her voice soft. I took a slow sip of coffee. "I'm thinking they're finding out exactly what I'm worth." Over the next 3 days, the calls increased exponentially, a relentless barrage of urgent pleas. Graham called, Diane called, even Justin Bayview, Harold's son, who was still on the board, reached out, his voice thick with concern. The tenant portal remained stubbornly down. The automated maintenance scheduling system was throwing catastrophic errors, causing a backlog of frustrated residents. The automatic payment processing had failed entirely, affecting thousands of residents across their portfolio, threatening their revenue stream. I didn't respond to any of them. I let the voicemails pile up, listened to their mounting desperation, and felt nothing. Not joy, not vindication, just a quiet, resolute detachment. On day 4, an email arrived from Devlin Systems, a regional competitor to Veltria. They manage fewer properties than Veltria, but they had been expanding rapidly, quietly, steadily, with a reputation for solid, reliable technology. The email was from their director of technology, Lawrence Devlin himself. "Victor, I heard about your situation at Veltria. We've always admired your work from afar." The integrated property management system you built is legendary in our industry. Would you be interested in discussing opportunities with us? We're looking to upgrade our entire property management infrastructure and could use someone with your unique expertise. I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile for the first time in weeks. I replied immediately and set up a meeting for the following day. That evening, as Elaine and I were preparing dinner, the inviting aroma of herbs and garlic filling the kitchen, my doorbell rang. A persistent, almost frantic chime. I opened the door. Graham Vickers stood on my porch, his normally immaculate designer suit wrinkled and disheveled, his expensive glasses slightly askew on his nose. His usually confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a frantic desperation that distorted his features. "Victor," he began, his voice hoarse. "I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but we have an emergency situation. The entire system is down. Nothing is working. The team can't figure out what's wrong or how to fix it." His words tumbled out in a panicked rush. I leaned against the doorframe, my arms crossed, a quiet observer of his unraveling. "That sounds serious," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. "It is," he gasped, running a hand through his already mussed hair. "We need your help. The board has authorized me to offer you a substantial consulting fee, $500 per hour, whatever it takes. Please, Victor." I thought about the cardboard box sitting in my garage, containing the paltry physical remnants of 18 years of my life. 18 years of building, innovating, maintaining, reduced to a few mementos. I thought about his casual, nothing personal, just cost-cutting. I thought about the documentation team they'd never approved, the warnings they'd ignored, the countless times I'd tried to share my knowledge, only to be dismissed. "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles, Graham," I said quietly, my voice devoid of malice but firm as bedrock. "But I have an interview tomorrow." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, a silent echo of my earlier platitude. "Something will turn up, just like I thought it would." I closed the door on his stunned, pale face, the image of his shock imprinted on my mind. Then I turned and went back to making dinner, the aroma of the food filling the air. For the first time since my termination, since that day 2 weeks ago, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even a triumphant glee. Just a pure, crystalline clarity. I wasn't going to help them fix what they had so carelessly, so arrogantly broken. The path forward was clear. The interview with Lawrence Devlin went better than I could have possibly imagined. We met at a discreet coffee shop in downtown Rochester, a neutral territory far from both companies' offices, a place where we could speak freely and openly. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a comforting scent that grounded the conversation. "I've followed your work for years," Victor Lawrence said, stirring his coffee slowly, his gaze direct and earnest. He was a man in his late 40s, with a sharp mind and a quiet intensity that immediately inspired trust. "That integrated property management system you built at Veltria is legendary in our industry. Nobody else has anything close to it. It's widely regarded as the gold standard, though few understand the sheer effort and ingenuity that went into it." "Thank you," I said, a rare, genuine warmth spreading through me. It was validating to hear such recognition, especially after months of being dismissed. It took time, a lot of time. "And that's what I want to talk about, Victor," Lawrence replied, setting his spoon down. "Time and foresight. We're looking to build something similar here, something truly groundbreaking. But we absolutely do not want to start from scratch. We need someone who deeply understands the architecture, the intricate integration points, the layered security protocols. Someone who can not only build us something better than what's currently out there, but also ensure its long-term stability and scalability. We need a visionary, not just a coder." "I'm interested," I affirmed, my voice unwavering. The prospect of building something new, Building it right from the ground up was invigorating. Lawrence smiled, a genuine, expansive smile that reached his eyes. Good, because I'm prepared to offer you the position of Chief Systems Architect. Full benefits, generous stock options, and a salary 20% higher than what you were making at Veltria. This isn't just a job offer, Victor. It's an invitation to shape the future of property management technology with us. It was a good offer. Almost too good. Why me? I asked, a flicker of my old skepticism surfacing. There are younger engineers out there, cheaper ones, eager to prove themselves. Lawrence laughed, a rich, knowing sound. You sound like your former employer, Victor. We tried that route. Believe me. We hired 3 bright young engineers from top schools, brimming with the latest theories and frameworks. They built us something sleek and modern, with all the bells and whistles. But it crashes every time we get more than 100 simultaneous users. It's built on fragile assumptions, not robust engineering. We don't need cheap, Victor. We need reliable. We need experience. We need someone who understands that true value lies not just in cutting-edge tech, but in rock-solid foundations. I accepted the offer the very next day, a profound sense of purpose filling the void that Veltria had left. Meanwhile, Veltria's problems were escalating, turning into a full-blown crisis. Alan, bless his loyal heart, kept me updated through occasional, terse texts, painting a grim picture. The system had been partially restored, a patchwork job. But critical functions were still failing sporadically, often at the worst possible times. They'd brought in an expensive consulting firm, specialists in legacy system recovery. But even they were struggling, unable to unravel the Gordian knot of undocumented, custom code. A week after I started at Devlin, my new office still smelling faintly of fresh paint, Graham called again. His voice, when I finally picked up, was devoid of any pretense, raw with desperation. Victor, please, this is getting serious. We've lost access to payment records for the past 3 months. Tenants are complaining about incorrect charges, threatening lawsuits. The consulting team says they need your input on the database structure. They're completely stumped. I was tempted to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail as I had before, but something, a fleeting curiosity perhaps, made me pick up. Graham, I said, my voice calm and professional, I'm employed elsewhere now. I have an exclusive contract with Devlin Systems. I'm afraid I can't help you. Well, double whatever they're paying you, he blurted out, a desperate gambler raising the stakes. For just 2 days of your time, Victor. Just get us through this. It's not about the money, Graham. His voice hardened, a flicker of his old arrogance returning through the panic. Then what is it about? Revenge. Are you enjoying watching us struggle? The accusation hung in the air, sharp and ungracious. I paused, considering my answer carefully. I wouldn't lie, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing any weakness. No, Graham, I said, my voice even. I'm not enjoying it. But you made a business decision. You decided my experience, my knowledge, my commitment to long-term stability wasn't worth the cost. Now you're discovering what that actually means. This is the consequence of that decision. The board. He interrupted, his voice slightly muffled as if he was talking through clenched teeth. Wants to discuss bringing you back. Full salary, plus a significant signing bonus. Acknowledging your value. For a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, a brief warmth of triumph, but it quickly faded. Going back would solve nothing in the long run. The same executives who had decided I was expendable, who prioritized short-term gains over foundational integrity, would still be there, waiting for the next opportunity to cut costs, to dismiss expertise. It would be a temporary reprieve, not a lasting solution. I appreciate the offer, Graham, I said, shaking my head slightly, even though he couldn't see me. But I've made a commitment to Devlin Systems. A commitment I intend to honor. Graham's voice hardened further, a distinct edge of menace entering his tone. You know, Victor, There could be legal implications if we discover you intentionally made our systems difficult to maintain. Non-compete clauses, intellectual property concerns. We have lawyers. There it was, the threat. The one I had been expecting, the classic corporate maneuver, when all other options failed. The system is exactly as it was when the company repeatedly denied my requests for a documentation team, Graham. I replied evenly, my voice betraying no emotion. Every line of code belongs to Veltria, as specified in my employment contract. I've taken nothing with me except my experience, my knowledge, and my reputation. But feel free to have your lawyers contact mine. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly as I lowered the phone. Not from fear, but from a surge of righteous anger that I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. The accusation that I'd somehow sabotaged them, that I'd intentionally hobbled their systems, was the final, unforgivable insult. At Devlin, I was starting fresh, building systems properly from the ground up. This meant comprehensive documentation, robust training programs for the entire engineering team, and layers of redundancies that would prevent the kind of catastrophe Veltria was currently experiencing. I wasn't going to look back anymore, and I certainly wasn't going to help them. Some lessons I realized had to be learned the hard way. A month after joining Devlin Systems, I received an unexpected visitor in my new, spacious office. Alan, my former database administrator, stood awkwardly in the doorway, a laptop bag slung over his shoulder, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a wariness that spoke volumes. "Got time for lunch, Vic?" he asked, a hopeful note in his voice. Over sandwiches at a bustling deli nearby, Alan filled me in on the escalating chaos at Veltria. He lowered his voice, despite the noisy lunchtime crowd, as if sharing classified intelligence. "It's worse than you think, Vic," he confessed, pushing a pickle across his plate. "They've lost access to historical data going back 3 years. Key financial records, tenant histories, maintenance logs gone, and the backup systems are corrupted somehow. The consulting firm, the expensive one, they're saying they might need to rebuild from scratch. It's a disaster." I wasn't surprised. The backup system, a crucial part of the infrastructure I had designed, had multiple redundancies and security protocols that needed to be followed precisely. It wasn't a simple click to restore process. Skip one step, ignore a crucial security check, and the entire process would fail in a way specifically designed to protect tenant data from unauthorized access or accidental corruption. It was a failsafe, ironically, that now locked them out of their own past. "That's not all," Alan continued, leaning closer, his voice barely a whisper. "I found something when I was trying to help the consultants understand the payment processing system. Something disturbing. Graham had been planning your termination for months, long before he even hired those junior engineers." "How do you know this?" I asked, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Alan pulled out his laptop, its screen a dull glow in the dim light of the deli. He quickly navigated through some files, then turned the screen towards me. It was a series of emails he had discovered deep within the system archives, emails between Graham and the board. They explicitly discussed legacy staff reduction plan, and specifically named me as the first target. Graham's carefully constructed plan was laid bare. He told them they could replace you with cheaper engineers and transition to off-the-shelf solutions within 6 months. Alan explained, his voice laced with indignation. He projected cost savings of over $1 million annually. $1 million, Vic. That was his selling point. I read through the emails, feeling a strange, disquieting detachment. One line from Graham, in particular, stood out, a chilling testament to his profound misunderstanding. "Hale's custom systems are unnecessarily complex. He's made himself indispensable by design, not necessity. There's more," Alan said, snapping the laptop shut. "The private equity firm that owns Veltria is planning to sell the company. They've been prepping for this for over a year." Graham was brought in specifically to cut costs and make the company look more profitable and attractive to potential buyers before the sale. He was their hatchet man. Now it all made perfect, horrifying sense. The relentless push for standardization, the stubborn resistance to funding proper documentation, the sudden, laser-like focus on reducing senior staff costs. It wasn't about improving the company's long-term operational efficiency. It was about dressing it up for a quick flip, inflating its perceived value for a rapid, lucrative sale. I had been a costly line item on a balance sheet, not an invaluable architect. "Why are you showing me this, Alan?" I asked, a mix of anger and resignation swirling within me. "Because I quit yesterday," Alan replied, a triumphant glint in his eye. "And I'm not the only one. Half the IT department has left. The consultants are estimating at least 6 months to restore full functionality. Maybe longer. It's chaos, Vic." He hesitated, then added, "And because Veltria's biggest client, Westbrook Properties, is considering jumping ship. They've completely lost faith in Veltria's management system. They're bleeding money, losing tenants." I thought about the implications. Westbrook represented nearly 30% of Veltria's revenue. Losing them would be devastating, especially with a sale pending. It could completely derail the private equity firm's plans. "What will you do now, Alan?" I asked, hoping what his answer might be. Alan grinned, a genuine wide grin. "Actually, I was hoping Devlin might be hiring database administrators." Later that afternoon, I spoke with Lawrence about bringing Alan on board. He agreed immediately, without hesitation. We were building a team, brick by brick, with people who understood what it meant to create systems that lasted, systems built on integrity and foresight, not on short-sighted cost-cutting. That evening I received another call from Graham. This time, his voice had completely lost its authoritative edge, replaced by a desperate, almost pleading tone. "Victor, please. The situation is critical. Westbrook is threatening to terminate their contract. The board is questioning my decisions. My job is on the line. We need your help." "I'm sorry, Graham," I said, my voice firm. "I can't help you. Name your price," he implored, his voice cracking. "Anything. Just tell us what it will take." "It's not about price, Graham," I replied, the words chosen carefully, delivered with quiet conviction. "It's about respect. Respect for experience, for the years of knowledge, for the painstaking work that goes into building something right the first time, ensuring its longevity, something you chose to disregard." The line was silent for a long moment, the silence heavy with his unspoken realization. "You knew," he finally whispered, his voice barely audible. "You knew this would happen. You knew exactly what would break and when." "No, Graham," I corrected him, my voice calm, resolute. "I just knew what I had built and what it took to maintain it. That's information I tried to share with you and with the board many, many times. Information you chose to ignore." I ended the call, feeling neither triumph nor regret. Just the quiet certainty that some lessons can only be learned through the bitter crucible of failure. The opportunity came faster than I expected, a swift, decisive turning of the tide. 2 months into my new role at Devlin Systems, still settling into the rhythms of a company that truly valued long-term vision, Lawrence called me into his office. "I just got off the phone with Jeffrey Westbrook," he said, referring to the CEO of Westbrook Properties, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and cautious anticipation. "They're officially terminating their contract with Veltria next month, and they want to know if we can handle their portfolio." Westbrook Properties managed over 10 silos and units across the Northeast. Taking them on would more than double Devlin's current operations. It was a monumental challenge, but also an unprecedented opportunity. "We're not ready for that kind of scale, Lawrence," I admitted, my practical engineering mind immediately assessing the immense undertaking. "The new system is coming along beautifully, but it's only halfway there. It's built to scale, but not overnight. Lawrence leaned forward, his elbows on his desk, his gaze intense. What would it take to get ready, Victor? If we absolutely had to. I thought about it, calculating the resources, the timelines, the potential pitfalls. 3 more engineers, dedicated server infrastructure, and at least 8 weeks of accelerated development time, I recited. Even then, it would be tight, extremely tight. We'd be building the plane while flying it. Jeffrey's desperate, Lawrence said, a sympathetic note in his voice. Veltria's failures are seriously affecting their reputation with tenants. He's willing to give us 12 weeks, and he'll fund the necessary infrastructure expansion directly. He wants a partner he can trust, a system that won't collapse. This was the moment, the turning point. If Devlin took on Westbrook and succeeded, it would establish us as a serious, dominant competitor in the industry. If we failed, it could sink both companies. It was a high-stakes gamble, but a calculated one. Let me think about the architecture, I said, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with a complex challenge. I'll draw up a detailed plan by tomorrow morning. That night, I barely slept. I was hunched over my drawing board, surrounded by empty coffee cups, sketching intricate system diagrams, mapping complex data migration pathways, and considering every conceivable scaling challenge. By morning, a comprehensive plan lay before me. Ambitious, yes, but undeniably achievable. It was a hybrid approach, designed to let us onboard Westbrook's properties in stages, minimizing disruption, ensuring stability at each step. When I presented it to Lawrence, he studied it meticulously, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is solid, Victor," he said finally, a note of approval in his voice. "Very solid. But I notice you've included a substantial documentation phase. That adds 3 weeks to the timeline, and we're already pushing the envelope." "It's non-negotiable, Lawrence," I replied, my voice firm, allowing no room for compromise. That's precisely where Veltria failed. We document everything from day one, every line of code, every system configuration, every architectural decision. We train the team on every component, every process. No single points of failure, human or technical. We build this to last, not just to function. Lawrence nodded a slow, deliberate movement. "Agreed," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "I'll take your word for it. Let's move forward. This is how we build a legacy." The next weeks were intense, a blur of focused effort and tireless dedication. We hired 5 more engineers, including 2 who had recently left Veltria, disillusioned by the chaos and mismanagement. Alan, my trusted database administrator, built an ingenious database migration tool that could translate Veltria's convoluted, undocumented data structure into our new, organized system. I designed a modular, flexible architecture that could scale seamlessly with Westbrook's needs, anticipating future growth and change. The energy in the office was electric, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere I had left behind. Halfway through the project, an unexpected email arrived from Justin Bayview, Harold's son, who still sat on Veltria's board. "Victor, I want to apologize for how things ended. The board was misled about the true implications of letting you go. Graham has been removed as CTO. We're struggling immensely to recover, and Westbrook's departure will hit us hard. If you're ever interested in coming back, the door is open. We recognize our mistake." I read the email, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. My focus was on the future, on the project at hand, on building something truly exceptional. 10 weeks into our 12-week timeline, we were ready for a staged rollout. Westbrook's smallest region, comprising 2,000 units in western New York, would migrate first. If successful, the remaining regions, the bulk of their portfolio, would follow. It was a calculated risk, but one we were prepared for. The day before the migration, Lawrence called me into his office again. A familiar face was waiting for me. Jeffrey Westbrook himself, a tall, imposing figure whose presence commanded attention. "So you're the system architect?" Jeffrey said, standing to shake my hand, his grip firm and direct. Lawrence has told me a lot about you. All good, I hope. Jeffrey smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. He says you've built us something that won't break down every time we add a new property. Something that will grow with us, not constrain us. That's precisely what we need. That's the plan, I replied, a quiet confidence in my voice. I also hear you used to work for Veltria, he continued, his gaze sharp, assessing. I nodded, unsure where he was going with this. They're in trouble, you know. Serious trouble. The private equity firm is trying desperately to sell, but with Westbrook leaving and their system still not fully functional, they're not finding many interested buyers. He paused, then added, except one. Who's that? I asked, though I suspected the answer, a strange sense of circularity settling over me. Devlin Systems, Lawrence said, his voice low, his eyes meeting mine. We're considering making an offer. A substantial discount to what they were valued at 6 months ago. Before the implosion. I looked between them, processing the monumental implications. The company that had discarded me, now a distressed asset, potentially being acquired by the very company I had helped build into a formidable competitor. If that happens, Jeffrey continued, his gaze still fixed on me, we'd want someone who understands both companies, both systems, to lead the integration. Someone who could salvage what's valuable from Veltria's existing infrastructure while seamlessly transitioning everything to your new, superior architecture. Are you asking if I'd be willing to work on that? I clarified, my voice steady despite the incredible irony of the situation. Lawrence nodded. Only if the acquisition goes through, Victor, and only if you're comfortable with it. It would be a massive undertaking, but an incredibly important one for us. I thought about it. The irony was almost unbearable. The system I had built, the people I had trained, the company that had so carelessly discarded me, all potentially coming back under my direction, not in revenge, but as a strategic necessity. I'd be willing, I said finally, a sense of quiet purpose settling over me. But I have one condition. We do it right. Full documentation from day one. Proper training programs for all staff, no shortcuts, no compromises on quality for the sake of speed or perceived cost savings. Agreed, Lawrence said, a broad smile spreading across his face. We've learned that lesson, Victor. We've seen the consequences of cutting corners firsthand. This time, we build it to last. As I walked back to my office, the sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt no vindication, no desire for revenge. Just the simple, profound satisfaction of knowing that good work, done right, with integrity and foresight, eventually speaks for itself. It didn't need me to gloat or to boast. The results would be the ultimate testament. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what had once been Veltria Housing's headquarters. The sleek, modern sign above the reception desk now read, Devlin Integrated Property Management. The acquisition had gone through. For less than a quarter of what the company had been valued at just before my departure, a silent testament to the true cost of their cost-cutting. Lawrence and I walked through the offices, a familiar rote, greeting former Veltria employees who would be staying on through the transition. Some looked away awkwardly, their faces betraying a mix of embarrassment and apprehension. Others smiled with genuine relief, sensing a new, more stable era. A few, those who had worked closely with me over the years, nodded with quiet understanding, a knowing glance that passed between us. Graham was gone, dismissed along with most of the executive team that had approved my termination and overseen the company's rapid decline. Justin Bayview, Harold's son, had stayed on as a consultant, helping to ease the transition with legacy clients. A pragmatic move to salvage what little goodwill remained. When we reached the server room, my old domain, the heart of the system I had built, I paused. Through the glass walls, I could see the familiar racks of hardware I had specified, the blinking lights of systems I had designed and brought to life. It was a relic, soon to be decommissioned. Want to go in? Lawrence asked, sensing my pause, offering a symbolic gesture of closure. No need, I replied, a faint smile touching my lips. We'll be migrating everything to the new infrastructure anyway. A clean slate, built properly. In the main conference room, the remaining Veltria staff had gathered for the official announcement. Lawrence introduced me as the Chief Integration Officer, the man who would be overseeing the entire technical transition. Many of you already know Victor, he began, his voice resonating with respect. He built the original systems that ran this company for nearly 2 decades, the very foundation upon which it was built. Now, he'll be guiding us through the integration of both companies, technologies into something better, something stronger, something more resilient than either had before. As I looked out at the faces, some familiar, some new, I felt no triumph, no desire to say, "I told you so." What would be the point? The proof was in the pudding, in the company's very survival and transformation. Instead, I spoke briefly about the transition plan, the timeline, the comprehensive support that would be available to everyone during the process. I emphasized, with a deliberate clarity that resonated throughout the room, that no one would be left behind due to cost-cutting measures. The irony, I knew, was not lost on anyone present. 1 year after the acquisition, Devlin Integrated Property Management had become the largest property management company in the Northeast. The massive migration was complete, with all properties now running on the new system I had designed, fully documented, properly staffed, and functioning with a reliability that had been a distant dream at the old Veltria. On a crisp autumn morning, the leaves along Lake Ontario ablaze in brilliant shades of red and gold. A fitting backdrop for the conclusion of this chapter, I drove to the office for a final meeting with Lawrence. "The board approved your proposal, Victor," Lawrence said as soon as I sat down, a wide, enthusiastic smile on his face. "The Technical Education Division will launch next quarter. You'll have full autonomy to design the curriculum and hire instructors. This is a game changer for us and for the industry." This had been my condition for staying on after the integration was complete. Not a higher title, not more money, but the creation of a division dedicated to training the next generation of systems engineers and architects. A place where they would learn not just how to code, but how to build things meant to last, how to prioritize long-term stability over short-term gains, how to truly understand the systems they create. "Thank you, Lawrence," I said, a profound sense of satisfaction settling over me. "That means a lot. More than you know." "No, Victor, thank you," Lawrence replied, his gaze genuine. "What you've built here, it's truly remarkable. Not just the technology, but the culture around it. The documentation, the knowledge sharing, the unwavering emphasis on quality over quick fixes. You've transformed us." Later that afternoon, I cleared out my integration office. Unlike my hasty, unceremonious exit from Veltria, this was a planned, celebrated transition to my new role, a conscious step forward. As I packed my few personal effects, a gentle knock came at the door. Justin Bayview stood there, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Got a minute, Victor?" he asked, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. We walked to the small courtyard outside the building, the autumn air crisp and invigorating. "My father asked about you," Justin said, his hands in his pockets. "He's retired in Florida now, fishing a lot. But he still follows company news. He was glad to hear you were back, in a manner of speaking, leading the charge. How is Harold?" I asked, a genuine fondness for the old man. "Good. Healthy. Still sharp as ever," Justin replied. He paused, then looked at me directly. "He always said letting you go would be the biggest mistake this company could make." Turns out he was right. I nodded, unsure what to say in response to such a frank admission. "I learned something from all this, Victor," Justin continued, his voice soft, reflective. Value isn't always visible until it's gone. Sometimes, it takes a collapse to realize what you truly had. As I drove home along the lakeshore, the setting sun casting long shadows, I thought about value. The value of experience, of care taken, of doing things right the first time, of systems built to last, designed for resilience, and the people who painstakingly build them. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't needed to. I had simply moved forward, building something better, something that would outlast any individual decision, any short-term thinking, any corporate maneuvering. Sometimes, I mused, the best response to being undervalued is simply to quietly prove your worth elsewhere, and let the results, undeniably, speak for themselves. The lake shimmered, reflecting the vast, open sky, a symbol of endless possibilities.